The moon called Vareth 7 was a dead place. No wind blew across its gray surface. No water flowed through its empty valleys. The only signs of life were the research stations that dotted the landscape like metal scars, built by beings who had traveled across the stars to study something that should not exist. 3 kilometers beneath the surface, buried under layers of crystal and ancient rock, there was a door. It was not an ordinary door. It stood 40 meters tall and 20 meters wide, carved from a single piece of black stone that scientists could not identify. The surface was smooth as glass, but covered with symbols that seemed to move when you were not looking directly at them. These symbols were older than any civilization in the known galaxy. They were older than the stars themselves. The Kalori had found this door 8,000 years ago. They were a proud species, tall and elegant, with silver skin and eyes that could see colors humans had no names for. They had conquered disease. They had mastered gravity. They had built an empire of 400 worlds and welcomed 300 species into their coalition. But this door had defeated them completely. Commander Zethel stood in front of the vault as he did every morning, his hands clasped behind his back and his expression carefully neutral. He had been stationed on Vareth 7 for 15 years. His hair had turned from silver to white in that time. His joints ached from the cold that seeped up from the deep tunnels. But he could not leave. The vault held him like a magnet holds iron. "Any progress?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Kuvan, his chief researcher, shook her large head. She was a Dreth, a species with 4 arms and skin the color of dark copper. Her people were known for their patience and their brilliant minds, but even she looked tired. "We tried 17 new frequency combinations last night," she said. "The vault did not respond to any of them. I am beginning to think it never will." The inscription above the door was clear. It had been translated long ago, and every researcher knew the words by heart. The door demanded a voice, not a code, not a password, not a key made of metal or light or mathematics. It wanted someone to speak, and it would know if the voice was the right one, but no voice had ever been right. The Melodor had been the first to attempt the challenge after the Kalori failed. They were creatures of pure sound, beings whose bodies were made of vibrating energy. They had no physical form, only waves of music that rippled through the air. For 300 years, they had sung to the vault. They had tried every note and every melody. They had harmonized in groups of thousands and whispered alone in the dark. The door had remained silent. The Vrex came next. They were masters of technology, their bodies more machine than flesh. They built devices that could produce any sound in the universe. They bombarded the door with frequencies too high for organic ears and too low for organic minds. They tried radio waves and gamma waves and waves that existed only in theoretical equations. Nothing worked. The Mindari were perhaps the saddest case. They were telepaths who communicated without speaking, their thoughts flowing from mind to mind like water. But thought was not voice, and their attempts to project mental words at the vault drove many of their elders to madness. Some never recovered. Their species still mourned those lost minds. 412 species had tried over 8,000 years. Warriors and scholars and artists and priests. Beings of flesh and beings of light and beings that existed in dimensions humans could not perceive. The vault had rejected them all. Zethel walked closer to the door and placed his palm against the cold surface. He had done this many times before, hoping to feel something, anything, that might give him a clue. The stone was smooth and dead beneath his touch. "The council is growing impatient," he said quietly. "They speak of abandoning this project, sealing the tunnels and declaring the vault unsolvable." Kuvan made a sound of frustration. "They have said this before. They will not follow through. The mystery is too great. What if the vault contains the secrets of the architects? What if it holds the cure for every disease or the plans for weapons that could destroy galaxies? We cannot simply walk away. The architects. That was what they called the beings who had built this vault. No one knew their true name. No one knew what they looked like or how they lived or why they had vanished. All that remained were scattered ruins across 1,000 worlds and this single locked door on a dead moon. Some believed the architects had created life itself, seeding the galaxy with the building blocks of biology billions of years ago. Others thought they were just another fallen empire, their achievements exaggerated by time and legend. But everyone agreed on one thing. Whatever was behind this door was important enough to protect for eternity. Perhaps we are thinking about this wrong, Kuvan said, her four hands moving in patterns that showed her agitation. We have tried every species in the coalition. We have tried every combination of sounds our technology can produce. But what if the key is not sophistication? What if it is something simpler? Zethel turned to look at her. What do you mean? I do not know exactly. It is just a feeling. The architects were advanced beyond our understanding, yes. But they were also biological beings once. They had to start somewhere. Perhaps the voice they were waiting for is not the most complex or the most pure. Perhaps it is the most basic, the most raw. The commander considered this. It was an interesting theory, but not a helpful one. They had already tried the primitive species of the coalition, the ones who had only recently achieved space travel. None of them had succeeded either. We will continue our work, Zethel said finally. We will try every possibility until there are no possibilities left. That is all we can do. Kuvan nodded, though her expression remained troubled. She returned to her instruments, her forearms dancing across the controls as she prepared another series of tests. Neither of them noticed the small ship that had entered orbit above the moon. It was a human vessel, battered and limping from a damaged engine. It was requesting emergency permission to land for repairs. The humans were new to the coalition, barely a year and a half since their first contact with galactic civilization. They were considered primitive and unimportant, a species that would take centuries to catch up with the rest of the galaxy. Most coalition members had already forgotten they existed, but the universe has a strange sense of humor. Sometimes, the answer to an ancient question comes from the most unexpected place. Sometimes the key that unlocks eternity is held by someone who does not even know they are carrying it. The human ship descended toward the landing pad, its damaged engine leaving a trail of smoke across the gray sky. Everything was about to change. Daniel Hayes had never planned to be in space. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, he had dreamed of opening his own repair shop, fixing cars and tractors and maybe the occasional motorcycle. He was good with his hands and better with machines. They made sense to him in a way that people sometimes did not. But then the aliens came. Not in war, as the movies had always predicted, but in peace. They arrived with open arms and offered humanity a place in their great coalition of stars. Within 5 years, everything changed. Humans went from wondering if they were alone in the universe to being the newest and smallest, members of a galactic family that included hundreds of species. Daniel had joined the exploration corps because it paid well and because he wanted to see what was out there. He never expected to be important. He was just a mechanic, the guy who fixed things when they broke. On the exploration vessel Starward, his job was to keep the engines running and stay out of the way of the scientists and diplomats who did the real work. The Starward had been traveling through the outer systems when the port engine failed. It was not a major disaster, but it required parts they did not have and repairs they could not perform in space. The nearest station was on Vareth 7, a research moon that Daniel had never heard of. 3 days, Captain Martinez told the crew. We get the parts, we make the repairs, we get back on schedule. Nobody wander off and cause an interstellar incident. Daniel smiled at that. Humans had a reputation in the coalition, and it was not entirely good. They were seen as curious to the point of recklessness, emotional to the point of instability, and stubborn to the point of stupidity. Other species treated them like children who had stumbled into an adult gathering and did not know the rules. The research station on Vera 7 was cold and gray and very boring. Daniel spent the first day helping with repairs. The second day, he explored what little there was to explore. By the third day, he was restless and looking for anything to pass the time. That was when he met Lyra. She was a young Kalori technician, barely an adult by her species standards. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the artificial light, and her eyes were the color of pale moons. She found Daniel sitting in the observation deck, staring out at the empty landscape. "You are the human," she said. It was not a question. "One of them," Daniel replied. "Daniel Hayes, nice to meet you." Lyra tilted her head, a gesture that seemed to indicate curiosity. "I have never spoken with a human before. You are smaller than I expected." Daniel laughed. "We get that a lot. What's there to do around here for fun?" "Fun?" Lyra seemed confused by the concept. "This is a research station. We work. We study. We attempt to solve an unsolvable problem." "What problem?" And so Lyra told him about the vault. Daniel listened with growing fascination as she described the ancient door buried deep beneath the surface. She told him about the architects, the mysterious beings who had vanished billions of years ago. She told him about the 8,000 years of failed attempts to open the vault, the hundreds of species that had tried and failed, the inscription that demanded a voice no one possessed. "Can I see it?" Daniel asked when she finished. Lyra's expression changed to something like amusement. "You wish to attempt what the greatest minds in the galaxy could not achieve?" "No, I just want to look. I like old things. Machines, especially. And this sounds like the oldest machine ever built." Lyra considered his request. There was no rule against visitors observing the vault from the gallery. Humans were not considered a threat to anything, least of all an impenetrable door that had resisted entire civilizations. "Very well," she said. "But you must promise not to touch anything. And you must not speak to the researchers. They are very focused on their work." "I'll be quiet as a mouse," Daniel promised. The descent took nearly an hour. They traveled by elevator and then by foot, walking through tunnels carved from crystal that sparkled in the dim lights. The air grew colder as they went deeper, and Daniel could see his breath forming small clouds in front of his face. When they finally reached the vault chamber, Daniel stopped walking. His mouth fell open. His heart seemed to pause in his chest that the door was massive. It rose from the floor like a piece of night sky that had somehow become solid. The black surface drank in the light, and the symbols carved into it seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Daniel had seen beautiful things before, sunsets and mountains and the earth from orbit, but this was different. This was beautiful in a way that hurt. "It's incredible," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "It has been here longer than our species has existed, longer than most stars, and no one knows what lies behind it." Daniel walked to the edge of the observation gallery, his eyes fixed on the ancient door. Below him, a dozen researchers moved around the chamber, adjusting instruments and speaking in low voices. None of them looked up at the human visitor. He was not worth their attention, but the door seemed to look at him. That was a strange thought. Daniel knew. A door could not look at anything. It was just stone and symbols and mystery. But as he stood there in the cold air, he could have sworn he felt something reaching out from behind that black surface. Something old and patient and very, very curious. "What do the symbols mean?" he asked. "No one knows for certain," Lyra replied. "They are in a language that predates everything. Some scholars believe they are instructions. Others think they are warnings. The only part we have translated is the inscription above the door. What does it say? Lyra recited the words from memory. Speak, child of the stars, and be recognized. Your voice is the key. Your truth is the door. Daniel repeated the words quietly to himself. Speak and be recognized. Your voice is the key. It sounded almost like a prayer. He did not plan to say anything else. He did not plan to do anything except stand there and look. But the vault was so beautiful, and the moment was so strange, and the words came out before he could stop them. You're beautiful, he said softly, speaking to the door as if it could hear him. I've never seen anything like you. Deep within the black stone, something stirred. The symbols began to glow dot, and for the first time in 8,000 years, the Vault of Origins began to wake. The news spread faster than light could travel. Within hours, every major civilization in the galaxy knew that the Vault of Origins had awakened after 8,000 years of silence. Within days, ships began arriving at Vareth 7, carrying diplomats and scientists and observers from 100 different worlds. The dead moon became the center of the universe. Daniel watched it all happen from the small quarters they had given him in the research station. He had asked to leave, to go back to the starward and continue his journey with his crewmates, but that was no longer an option. He was too important now, too valuable, too much of a mystery. The Coalition Council convened a special session via holographic link. Representatives from dozens of species appeared as shimmering images in the main conference room, their faces showing curiosity and concern and things Daniel could not read. High Chancellor Morthis led the proceedings, her ancient silver form commanding attention without effort. Lieutenant Hayes, she said, using a rank Daniel had not known he possessed, you have been brought before this council to discuss matters of galactic significance. Do you understand the weight of what has occurred? Daniel stood in the center of the room, surrounded by holographic aliens who had traveled between stars while his ancestors were still learning to make fire. He felt like a child called to the principal's office. I'm trying to understand, he said. But honestly, I'm still confused about most of it. Morthis inclined her head. Then let us explain. The Vault of Origins has been sealed since before recorded history. Our legends speak of the architects, beings who existed when the galaxy was young, who planted the seeds of life on countless worlds and then disappeared. They left behind ruins and mysteries and this one locked door. For 8,000 years, we have tried to open it. For 8,000 years, we have failed. And now you, a human, have done what we could not. I didn't really do anything, Daniel said. I just talked. I didn't even say anything important. And that is precisely what makes this significant. The voice belonged to a Melodar representative, a shifting cloud of sound and color that Daniel found hard to look at directly. We are beings of pure music, and the vault ignored us. The Vrex threw every frequency in existence at that door, and it remained sealed. But your simple human words, spoken without intention or skill, achieved what our greatest efforts could not. This tells us something important about the architect's intentions. Tuvan stepped forward, her forearms folded in a gesture of respect. If I may, High Chancellor, I believe I can explain the science behind this phenomenon. She activated a display that showed the complex patterns of human speech. Human vocal cords are unique in the known galaxy. They produce layered harmonic frequencies that create what we call resonance chaos. This is not a flaw or a primitive trait. It appears to be exactly what the architects designed their lock to recognize. Designed? A Vrex representative spoke up, her metallic voice sharp with skepticism. You suggest the architects specifically created a lock that only humans could open? But humans did not exist when the vault was built. They were not even a possibility. That is correct, Kuvan said. But consider this. The architects seeded life throughout the galaxy. What if they did not just scatter random genetic material? What if they had a plan? What if they knew billions of years in advance exactly what type of voice would eventually evolve to match their lock? The chamber fell silent as the representatives processed this idea. Daniel felt dizzy trying to follow the implications. The architects had built a lock and then created the key, but they had made that key out of living beings who would not exist for billions of years. It was planning on a scale that made his head hurt. High Chancellor Morthis spoke again. Lieutenant Hayes, regardless of the reasons, you are now the only being in the known galaxy who can open the Vault of Origins. We must ask you, will you do this for us? Will you open the door? Daniel looked around the room at the dozens of alien faces watching him. They were not looking at him like he was primitive anymore. They were looking at him like he was something impossible, something miraculous, something that did not make sense but existed anyway. What's inside? He asked. What do you think is behind the door? We do not know, Morthis admitted. It could be treasure or technology or knowledge that would change everything we understand. It could be a weapon or a warning or an empty room. The architects left no hints about the vault's contents, only the door and its demand for a voice. Daniel thought about his life back on Earth. He thought about his mother's small house with the garden in the back, the way she grew tomatoes every summer, even though half of them never ripened. He thought about his father teaching him to fix engines in the garage, grease under their fingernails, and the radio playing old songs. He thought about his sister and her terrible jokes, and the way she always laughed at them herself. He was nobody special. He was just a guy from Ohio who had stumbled into something bigger than himself. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the architects had not wanted someone special. Maybe they had wanted someone ordinary, someone who would speak without calculation, someone whose voice carried the chaos and imperfection of a real life. Okay, Daniel said. I'll do it. I'll try to open the door. The journey back down to the vault chamber felt different this time. Daniel was not a curious visitor anymore. He was the center of attention for the entire galaxy. Every step he took was recorded by dozens of devices. Every breath he took was analyzed by scientists who wanted to understand the miracle of his ordinary voice. The door waited for him, its symbol still glowing with that soft golden light. It looked different now, or maybe Daniel was the one who had changed. When he first saw the vault, he had thought it was beautiful. Now he thought it looked patient, like it had been waiting for him specifically across all those billions of years. He walked forward alone. The researchers and diplomats stayed back, giving him space to approach the ancient door. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber. When he reached the door, he placed his palm against the black surface. It was warm now, not cold like before. The warmth spread up his arm and into his chest, and he felt something that might have been recognition. I don't know what you want me to say, Daniel said quietly. I'm not a poet or a singer or anything like that. I'm just a mechanic from Earth. I fix things that are broken. The door hummed softly. But maybe that's why you called me here. Maybe something needs to be fixed. Maybe after all these years of being locked away, you just need someone to talk to. Daniel took a deep breath. So here I am. I'm Daniel Hayes. I'm human. And I'm ready to hear whatever you have to tell me. The door began to open. The alarm started screaming 3 seconds after Daniel spoke. Red lights flashed across the chamber. Researchers dropped their instruments and scrambled toward their emergency stations. Voices shouted in a dozen different languages, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with sudden energy. Daniel stood frozen at the gallery railing, his eyes wide with shock. The door was glowing. Thin lines of golden light traced through the ancient symbols, spreading like cracks in ice, like veins beneath skin, like the awakening of something that had slept for far too long. What did you do? Lyra grabbed his arm. her silver face pale with something that looked like fear. "Human, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Daniel stammered. "I just said it was beautiful." "Ah, that's all." "I swear that's all I said." Commander Zethel burst into the chamber at a full run, his white hair flying behind him. He had spent 15 years watching the vault sit dead and silent. Now it was alive, and he did not know if that was wonderful or terrible. "Report," he commanded. "What happened?" Kuven's 4 hands flew across her instruments, her eyes darting between readings that made no sense. "The resonance chamber is activating. Energy levels are rising across all spectrums. The door is responding to something, but I don't understand what." "The human spoke," Lyra said, pointing at Daniel. "He said something about the door being beautiful, and then this started." Every eye in the chamber turned to look at Daniel. He felt very small under their alien gazes, like a mouse caught in the open by a circle of hawks. Zethel approached the gallery, his expression unreadable. "You spoke to the vault?" "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I was just looking at it, and I said it was beautiful. I didn't think anything would happen. Nothing was supposed to happen. I'm just a mechanic." The commander stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to look at the door. The golden light was fading now, settling back into the black stone like embers dying in ash. But something had changed. Daniel could feel it even if he could not explain it. "Speak again," Zethel said quietly. "What?" "Speak again. Say anything. Let us see if the vault responds to your voice." Daniel swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, and his hands were shaking. 100 alien researchers were watching him, waiting for him to do something impossible. He did not feel like the answer to an ancient mystery. He felt like a man who had accidentally knocked over something valuable and was about to be blamed for breaking it. He said. "Hello? My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm from Earth. I fix engines for a living. I don't really know what's happening right now." The vault blazed with light. Golden fire erupted across the surface of the door, brighter than before, spreading through every symbol and every crack in the ancient stone. The chamber filled with a deep humming sound that Daniel felt in his bones, in his teeth, in the very center of his chest. It was not painful, but it was overwhelming, like standing inside a bell while it rang. Researchers fell back from their stations. Some covered their ears. Others simply stared with expressions of pure amazement. Kuven made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "It's responding to him," she breathed. "After 8,000 years, the vault is finally responding." When the light faded this time, it did not go away completely. A soft golden glow remained in the symbols, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The vault had been dead for millennia. Now it was merely sleeping. Commander Zethel walked slowly down from the gallery until he stood directly in front of the massive door. He had devoted his life to this mystery. He had given up a family and a home and a normal career because he believed the vault held secrets worth discovering. Now, a random human had done in 5 seconds what countless geniuses had failed to do in 8,000 years. "How?" he asked, turning to face Daniel. "How is this possible?" "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "I really don't know." Kuven approached with her scanner held out in front of her. "May I examine you?" she asked Daniel. "I need to understand what makes your voice different." Daniel nodded, and she ran the device over him from head to toe. The scanner hummed and clicked and displayed streams of data that meant nothing to him. When it was finished, Kuven stared at the results for a long moment before speaking. "Harmonic overtones," she said finally. "That is the answer. Human vocal cords produce a unique pattern of harmonic overtones that no other species in the coalition possesses." "I don't understand," Zethel said. "What are harmonic overtones?" "When most species speak, Their voices produce clean, pure frequencies. It is considered a sign of biological refinement. But humans are different. Their voices are messy. When a human speaks, their vocal cords create not just one frequency, but many frequencies at once, layered on top of each other, interfering and combining in complex patterns. She pulled up a visual display that showed two waveforms side by side. One was smooth and regular, rising and falling in gentle curves. The other was wild and chaotic, full of peaks and valleys and unexpected spikes. "This is a calorie voice," Kuvan said, pointing to the smooth wave. "And this is the human voice. You see the difference? The human voice is not pure. It is full of what we would call noise or interference. But to the vault, it sounds like music," Daniel said quietly. He did not know where the words came from, but they felt true. Kuvan nodded slowly. The architects did not want sophistication. They did not want purity. They wanted chaos. They wanted a voice that contained multitudes, a voice that was imperfect and complex and alive. The human voice carries echoes and shadows that no other voice possesses. Daniel looked at the softly glowing door. He thought about all the species that had tried to open it, all the brilliant minds and advanced technologies that had failed. And then he thought about humans, the messy and emotional and imperfect newcomers that the rest of the galaxy considered primitive. "We're not supposed to be special," he said. "Humans aren't supposed to be anything important." Commander Zethel walked up to stand beside him. For the first time since Daniel had arrived, the old Kilori was smiling. "Perhaps," Zethel said, "the architects had a different opinion." The black stone split down the center without a sound. Golden light poured through the widening gap, warm and gentle, and nothing like Daniel had expected. He had imagined machinery or electronics or some kind of advanced technology that would be beyond his understanding. Instead, the light felt like sunshine on a summer morning, like the warmth of a fire on a cold night, like coming home after a long journey. The door swung open fully and revealed the vault's interior. It was not a room full of weapons. It was not a chamber of strange machines. It was a garden. Thousands of crystalline spheres floated in the air, suspended by invisible forces, arranged in patterns that seemed both random and perfectly organized. Each sphere glowed with its own soft light, amber and gold and pale white. Inside each one, Daniel could see something swirling, something alive, something that looked like the double helix patterns he remembered from high school biology. He stepped inside, and the spheres seemed to turn toward him like flowers following the sun. Kuvan entered behind him, her four hands trembling as she raised her scanner. "DNA," she whispered. "These are all genetic samples, billions of years old, but perfectly preserved." The architects stored the blueprints of life itself. More researchers followed, spreading through the vault with expressions of wonder and reverence. They moved carefully, afraid to disturb the floating spheres, afraid to damage something so ancient and precious. Commander Zethel walked beside Daniel as they made their way deeper into the vault. "The legends were true," the old Kelori said. "The architects did seed life throughout the galaxy. This is their library, their record of everything they created." The spheres were organized by species, Daniel realized. He could see labels floating beneath each one, written in the same strange symbols that covered the outside of the door. Some labels he did not recognize. Others made his heart beat faster. He found the Calorie sphere, glowing silver white. He found the Dreth sphere, dark copper like Kuvan's skin. He found the Melodor and the Vrex and dozens of other species he had never heard of. Each one was represented in this impossible garden, their genetic essence preserved for eternity. And then he found the center of the vault. A single sphere floated above a pedestal of polished stone, larger than all the others and glowing with a light that seemed to contain every color at once. The label beneath it was simple. Just two symbols that Daniel somehow understood without needing translation. Origin Prime. Kuvan approached the sphere with something like religious awe. Her scanner hummed and clicked and displayed results that made her gasp. "This is the base template," she said. "The original genetic code from which all other species were derived. Every form of life in the galaxy traces back to this single source." Daniel stared at the glowing sphere. "So the architects made all of us? Every species in the coalition?" "It appears so. They took this original code and modified it, adapted it, split it into countless variations that would thrive on different worlds. We are all cousins, Lieutenant Hayes. Every intelligent species in the galaxy shares common ancestors. This was incredible enough on its own." But Kuvan was not finished. "There is more," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "According to these readings, humans are not just another derivative species. Your genetic code is almost identical to the Origin Prime template. The differences are minimal. You are not just related to the architects. You are them, or at least the closest thing to them that still exists." Daniel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He was not sure if it was actually moving, or if his mind was simply struggling to process what he had heard. "That can't be right," he said. "Humans are one of the youngest species in the galaxy. We only discovered fire a few 100,000 years ago. We only left our planet a few decades ago." "Yes," Kuvan agreed. "But age does not determine ancestry. The architects were incredibly advanced, perhaps the most advanced beings who ever existed. And then they disappeared. But before they vanished, it seems they created a backup copy of themselves. A simplified version that could survive and eventually evolve back to sentience." "Humans," Daniel said. "Humans." He turned to look at the floating sphere, the Origin Prime, the genetic essence of beings who had shaped the entire galaxy. Somewhere in his body, in every cell, he carried a piece of them. He was their child, their heir, their surviving legacy. High Chancellor Morthis approached, her ancient face showing emotions that Daniel could not read. "Lieutenant Hayes, do you understand what this means?" "I think so," Daniel said slowly. "It means we're not the newcomers. We're not the primitives who stumbled into space by accident. We're the ones you've been waiting for." "Yes," Morthis inclined her head. "The architects left this vault for their children. They locked it with a voice that only their true heirs could possess. For 8,000 years, we assumed their descendants had died out or evolved beyond recognition. We never imagined they would return from a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy." Daniel thought about Earth. He thought about all the mistakes his species had made, all the wars and famines and acts of cruelty. He thought about the way other species saw humanity as violent and primitive and barely civilized. And now he was being told that humans were the inheritors of the most advanced beings the galaxy had ever known. It seemed like a joke, or maybe it was exactly right. "We're not perfect," Daniel said. "Humans, I mean. We've done terrible things to each other and to our planet. We still have so much to learn." "The architects were not perfect either," Morthis said. "They rose and fell like all civilizations. They made mistakes. They had flaws. But they also created beauty and wonder in life that spread across 1,000 worlds. And in the end, when they knew they were dying, they trusted you with their legacy." Daniel reached out and touched the Origin Prime sphere. It was warm beneath his fingertips, pulsing with a gentle rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. In that moment, he felt connected to something vast and ancient and wonderful. "We'll try to be worthy of it," he said. "I can't promise we'll succeed, but we'll try." The sphere seemed to glow brighter at his words, and Daniel could have sworn he felt something respond to him from across the ages. A welcome, an approval, a homecoming. The galaxy had been waiting for humans to arrive. And now that they were here, everything would be different. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they carried within them the voice that had been missing for billions of years. The voice of the architects, the voice of the beginning, the voice that had finally come home. Daniel Hayes, mechanic from Ohio, stood in the center of the Vault of Origins and smiled. Behind him, the future of the galaxy stretched out like an open road. It was time to see where that road would lead.